Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Shanghai. We really appreciate you joining us. I know this is a very popular topic, a big topic in the industry right now, and we're super excited to be here to discuss it. My name is Tim Hatt. I work with the GSMA Intelligence Group, which is the analyst arm of the GSMA, and we've written about satellite for a long time, but really only in the last sort of 3 or 4 years has it taken a turn to really pick up steam. And so we have done a few of these summits around the world and including in China last year. And so we're very excited to be back with the support of our sponsor, Nordic Semiconductor, and a great slate of speakers today. Here's how it's going to work. I am going to kick off with a sort of opening presentation to set the table with some of our analysis on what we see happening in the sector. We're then going to have a keynote from SES and a panel after that. We're then going to take a short break just to recuperate, give people time to stretch, and then we'll be back with a second speaker keynote from China Mobile and another panel to round us out. So if you hopefully keep any questions, you can ask speakers afterwards or myself. I know there are a lot of people. If you haven't got a seat, feel free to stand around and we get to one as we go. That's a bit about us. In terms of how we cover the sector, and I say Satellite and NTN has become a major focus, within that. So I like to start out with this slide when we talk about NTN trends here. If you look at sort of the last 15 years, you had this position where satellite capacity didn't really change very long. It was kind of a legacy industry, mostly serving maritime applications, up until really the late 2010s, when you've had this kind of explosion of capacity really driven by low Earth orbit. And that's, you've probably heard of Starlink and AST, China, there's similar things happening and a whole ecosystem around it. And the implication now is that as that capacity grows up, there's just a lot more in space. And this is really, underpinning a lot of the telco-satellite convergence that we're seeing and really lays the groundwork for some of the monetization opportunities. We always, and a lot of people are taking pictures, that's fine, but these slides will be available on our website, so don't worry if you miss some. When we track this, when we look at the mobile operators, this is a broad-based global trend. We now track in our numbers over 100 telco groups that have an active partnership with at least one satellite company, and they represent, you can see on the bottom of this table, almost 70% of global market share. So this is not niche, it's not confined to one region or other, it's very global. You can see the regional splits. The key point is that as this rises, we're going to see a lot of commercialization in 2025 and really into 2026 and 2027 as these constellations continue to rise up and more of the monetization opportunities come in both the consumer and the enterprise segments. Another way to show that is with a kind of picture map. What this is showing is in terms of the telco operators that have satellite partnerships in different parts of the world and how common those partnerships are. So you can see here that, again, the main takeaway point is that there really isn't a region where anything is not happening. It's more how much is it happening. And countries where you see red is where you have satellite launched by at least one operator. And in turquoise, it's actually down by more than 2. And I think, this kind of chart is changing literally by the month. So we expect, a lot of the color shading to turn to that turquoise throughout the rest of the year as more of the constellations come to fruition and start to be launched commercially. Now, we often get asked what the kind of competitive landscape looks like in terms of the satellite providers. And here's a snapshot. So what we're showing, this is not an exhaustive list. This is a list of some of the largest satellite providers in the world and how many satellites they have launched compared to how many they plan to launch. And it's kind of different. You see that sort of Starlink has a major first mover advantage in many parts of the world. It's launched about 7,000 satellites in orbit with a planned deployment of over 12,000 in just its first wave. It could be higher over time. And in its wake have come AST. You've probably heard of Kuiper from Amazon. We'll hear about, from Meng from SES talking about, direct-to-device ambitions there and other providers. This is really, happening as a catalyzing effect. But then in China, you have a whole, different ecosystem with even bigger numbers. And there's a very interesting set of dynamics there that we're following. And I think we're going to look for sort of more data and reporting on that as we go through this year. But again, coming back to the central point, capacity growth is rising, and the majority of this is driven at low Earth orbit. This is going to be a continued contested space, very competitive, potentially with some of the satellite providers seeing consolidation or further consolidation over time. Another way of showing, and I talked about satellite, competitive landscape. This is a view of what the mobile operator footprint looks like if you look at the subscriber bases of the operators that have a satellite partnership. This is not satellite subscribers. The point of this is to show the addressable opportunity or the addressable base that NTN connectivity could be offered into as an extension of terrestrial services. That's the sort of central theory of what we're looking at in the dynamics with NTN. And you can see whether you're in China, whether you're in India, whether you're in Europe or other parts of the world, there's very big subscriber bases at play here. Whether you call it direct to cell or direct to device, this is, I talked about low Earth orbit. The direct to device movement is really a main driver behind a lot of the market momentum we see. And that's because it offers a cheaper way to deliver connectivity right to people's smartphones or other IoT devices. This is a game changer in terms of the cost structure and the time to market. Again, I see people are taking pictures. You're welcome to, but these will be available. And what you see now is that for a lot of those providers that I talked about in the early slides, a majority or close to a majority of the services they are offering involve direct-to-device capabilities. This column here, BTS, this is backhaul, essentially backhaul support, where satellite is used primarily to help extend coverage into rural areas. But really, when we look at the telco partnerships happening in satellite, a lot of that is now in direct-to-device. And that's a really important move, and we're going to see that start to commercialize. Well, we're already seeing it commercialize, but continue into 2026 and 2027 as more of the constellations become live. When we talk about the addressable revenue opportunity, it's important to, and I'll put up some of our numbers about what we model that as. It's also important to ask the question of, will people or will businesses pay? Or is this something that people expect to be for free, included in their connectivity tariffs? Now, different operators will have different commercial strategies, of course. But one thing we wanted to do is survey the industry to figure out, okay, if you ask people, would they pay? This is some data from a survey we ran last year across 10 different countries. And the sort of takeaway point is that 60% of people, 60, said they would. And then these bars are the breakdown of, well, would you pay up to 5% more? Would it be 5 to 10? Would it be 10 to 20 or 20% higher? And when you boil that all down, you get to an average about 7, 8, 9, 10%, depending on the country. Now, that may not sound like a huge amount, but when you do the math and roll that through an ARPU base of millions of subscribers, it's actually a very meaningful revenue boost. So the takeaway points here are that people are willing to pay. Connectivity is still the #1 purchase criteria for people in selecting a mobile provider. And so this is really behind a lot of the competitive momentum and operators seeking a first mover advantage to bolster their networks with NTN connectivity so that they can offer 100% geographical reach. Now, I talked about earlier on whether individual operators will charge for their service. Again, there's no common rule there. There's no default. What we're seeing so far from some of the operators that have launched services or tariffs that involve NTN connectivity shows a mixed approach. These are largely groups that have partnered with Starlink in different parts of the world, not all, but most. And what we're showing, don't get too worried in the details. We don't have time to go into that. But the main thing I wanted to show you is if you are pricing satellite, is this final column. What does that equate to as an uplift on what people already pay? And what you see, the data is between about 10 and 25%. So it's interesting. People from that survey, remember, they say they pay about 8, 9, or 10% more. So far, the market is bearing about 15, 20, maybe 25% in some cases. So we'll see how this evolves over time. This is a really critical input, though, in terms of how the monetization, whether to the extent that monetization is realized versus something that is just addressable. Let's not forget about IoT. A lot of people, when they think about satellite connectivity and direct-to-device specifically, they think, well, it's just helping people in their smartphones. The reality is there's a lot happening in the IoT world. I'll come on to some of the forecasts, but with the standards releases, 3GPP, that now moved to release 19, they have built-in NTN capabilities directly into the standards. And what that means is that you get scale economies in the equipment. So it's cheaper to offer direct-to-device and IoT. It's a faster time to market, and you have a higher addressable user base. Again, there are a lot of people standing at the back. You're allowed to stand on the side too if you want. So there is a big set of vertical industries that we think are in place for IoT, and I think that's really important to look at. We're going to have Pete from Skylo on one of our panels today, and I wanted to introduce some survey data that we've recently done in collaboration with them, looking at sort of how enterprises size up their connectivity challenges and whether satellite can help with those. And this is data, this is fresh off the press, really, really recently, like survey run in the last month, where you can see that, if you look at businesses now, you ask them, well, how often are your operations delayed by a lack of data? It's pretty often. You get 20% saying every day, another third saying every week, and then a quarter monthly. That's like coming up on 75%. Okay, so where could satellite help? Well, you've got a whole range. You've got in monitoring the health of our equipment. You got supply chain efficiencies, asset tracking and logistics, safety, compliance. The list goes on. So again, this is not a one-trick pony. And what I think we're seeing is where the telco operators working in partnership with satellite groups are going to market with an integrated proposition to solve these connectivity challenges that previously were not met. So there's big reasons behind the IoT space. Now, when we come to what the addressable base looks like in IoT, we think it's about 2.5 billion to 3 billion devices overall. What I'm showing you here is actually a breakdown of that IoT addressable base for satellite specifically, and how that shakes out by industry. So again, we don't have time to go into the details, but the main point is that, yes, connected cars everybody knows about, and our colleague from Starwind will probably want to talk about that, but there are a whole range of industries that we think are addressable. Precision agriculture, logistics, manufacturing applications, heavy industry, oil and gas rigs, anything that is really either off the grid or may have intermittent connectivity is in play for satellite. And we know from our enterprise data that there is starting to be a buying shift towards this area. All right, 2 more slides, and then I'm gonna hand over to Meng. So what's it all worth? Well, when we look at this, our headline projection is that we think, or addressable revenue estimate is that it gets to about $30 to $35 billion per year by 2035. Now that is incremental revenue for the telco industry on top of what it currently makes, so about 2.5% uplift. Maybe 2/3 of that consumer, 25 to 30% business, and the rest in government and defense applications. A very significant opportunity. That's addressable. What does it depend on? Well, there are a number of factors. There's regulation, there's technology, there's other things. I think one thing we're going to talk about today is the question of the spectrum models. I won't get into this too much now, but suffice to say, whether you're talking about using a mobile satellite spectrum or MSS versus using repurposing the spectrum already used by the mobile operators, both of those are happening in parallel, but there are positives and negatives to each. We need to understand that to understand the implications. And so the last slide is really around open questions. You know, and that's why we're here today. That's what we want to get into in the panels, and we want to get into discussions, and I hope you're interested in. And whether these are about technology, you know, whether they are about the revenue model and the commercial partnerships, whether they are about spectrum or landing rights or other regulatory questions that we haven't even scratched the surface on, all of these are going to influence the trajectory of telco-satellite partnerships and commercialization. And that's really what we want to get into today. So this is not a short story. This is a multi-year evolution. We were here last year. I suspect we may well be again next year. And so we look forward to getting into the questions. So I hope that's given some food for thought to start us off. I am going to, and actually I should say, in addition to this, we have an interesting report coming from the GSMA. You can look at this, looking at sort of the overall industry dynamics. Have a look at that QR code. This summarizes things very well in terms of satellite dynamics overall. And Barbara from the GSMA will talk about that as we go. These are some of our reports. Take a quick picture, or you can get them on our website. We publish a lot. Our next State of the Market, which we publish quarterly, will be coming out at the end of this month. Lots happening. Lots changing. Check them out. That's it from me. I am going to hand over to Meng Li, who has come to us from SES, and he's going to give a presentation now. So Meng.
Good afternoon, everyone. So it's my great pleasure and privilege to be here today. I would like to walk you through a journey which we think we want to look at what's happening now in the industry and where we are heading to. So to start with, I have to introduce our company, SES. So SES is a global leader in multi-orbit satellite and space innovation. So since we started in 1985, we started broadcasting services to a lot of customers. So we have reached about 1 billion audience in the years. But in the last decade, we have seen that there's a great trend moving from broadcasting services to data services, which is really groundbreaking. So we have pioneered to commercialize the first no geostationary satellite, which is O3b mPOWER in 2014. So now we have served different markets, including governments, including enterprise customers, airplanes, cruise, and even other segments. We still think there's room to grow. So the vision for the growth is what's driving us forward with the increasing demand of the customers. So from 2019 to 2023, we have seen 700 million new internet users has been coming on board of the internet, which is about 18% of the growth. And nowadays, there's about 300,000 Wi-Fi connected using satellite. Still, it's not enough because still 32% of the global population is underserved, which require the reliable and high-performance connectivity. So our approach to addressing the increasing demand from the customers and also to serve the underserved market is through what we call the multi-orbit approach. So we are using the combination of the advantage of GEO satellite, MEO satellite, and the LEO satellite to serve our customers. So take an example of a scenario where it's a global multinational sports championship event. So our solution will provide seamless connectivity. For example, we can use GEO satellite to provide robust broadcasting connectivity On the other side, we can also use our MEO solutions for mission-critical communications and for the events itself. Also, we can use LEO satellites to provide Wi-Fi connectivities to the audience. So this applies to other industries as well. For example, in the oil and gas industry, or let's say energy industry, we can also use MEO and LEO to serve the different needs from the customers. Maybe it's from operation, or it's healthy of the warfare. So basically, our MEO constellation sits in the heart of our multi-orbit approach. So I want to maybe here address a little bit about our MEO constellation. So our O3b mPOWER is a combination of high throughput, high availability, and it provides predictable performance and flexible bandwidth. So with the dynamic of this satellite constellation, we can well serve our customers. So to look at this advantage in different aspects, for example, the MEO constellation sits closer than the GEO, so it provides much lower latency compared to the GEO satellites. Also, our satellite is highly configurable, so we have multi-beams that we can beam all the traffic together to reach about multi-gigabytes per second capacity to serve the really heavy demand customers. On the other side, because it's much closer, it's a bit further than the LEO constellation. So we only need, let's say, 6 satellites to cover the majority of the Earth, which provides the best economic of scale. So our solution anchored by the MEO constellation and our GEO HDS satellites and our LEO partnership, we well served many segments. So for example, the 5G mobile backhauls. We also provide a service to command the ports for governments and enterprises where they need portable and emergency services. We also serve different aero markets, including private airlines, private jets, and also military aircraft. So also the telcos using our solutions for cloud-based solutions and also for international trunking. So we have successfully delivered the trio orbit solutions in major cruise lines. We still believe the story is still unwritten, which means there's huge opportunity in the market. So this is just an example of the number of Wi-Fis which is enabled by the LTE backhaul, which is supported by satellite. We see there's still significant growth. So at SES, in order to address the growth, we are looking at different paths. So first of all, GEO is our foundation. We want to build our foundation based on our GEO satellites. We are planning to launch more GEO HDS satellites, which are software defined. Also, we are exploring the opportunities using MEO to support the D2D functionality and capability. Also, some of you might have already heard that we have partnered with company Link. So with this partnership, we will offer them MEO overlay and also a suite of other services which enable them to have a network as a service to their customers. Also on our side, we are also a strategic partner for them to go to the market. We are a channel partner, so which means our customers can also enjoy the benefits of the D2D capability brought by Link. So last but not least, we are also leading the efforts of building the Iris Square project, which is a European EU-based cloud connectivity service, which offers multi-orbit connectivity for servers and for other services. So I think everybody here is really excited about what's going on with NTN. We also see this market is representing the huge growth. We have already seen the different services like emergent services and remote messaging are evolving, and a lot of commercial services available. And we shouldn't also not ignore the IoT smart applications will grow significantly as well. So looking at different segments, we see there's a huge potential with smart agriculture and logistics, energy and monitoring, and mobility. In mobility, we look at, let's say, connected cars. We see they drive a huge demand for all the NTN players to play hard and get more services for the connected cars so that all the drivers will not lose their connectivity even when there's no terrestrial link. So I think the world is really changing very fast. So we are also looking at the technical innovations. We not only look at the satellite segment, but also on the ground. So a lot of innovations has been in place or is planning to be deployed. For example, at the moment, we are further virtualizing our ground infrastructure, which means a lot of use cases can be realized, and a lot of other customers, they can use our networks as part of their service, and they can treat our service as their own branches. So also we are looking at the artificial intelligence and networking. So basically means the AI will soon to analyze the whole network and predict what's going to happen so that we can dynamically allocate our resources and shape our capacity in different places. Also for internet satellite routing, our GeoSatellite and MEO-satellite can also play a role for LEO constellations to relay their traffic back to the Earth through GEO or MEO, because even without a ground station, there's still possibility for them to communicate with the Earth and pass the data. Also, we see a very increasing demand from different governments or enterprises looking for encryption mechanisms. So basically, they can encrypt their messages or their data and using their own great infrastructure and using our satellite to transform this data. So we see this is a huge demand. Even the quantum computing or quantum satellite is also something which attracts a lot of people's attention. Look at the future, we believe there's a huge demand for all the players to contribute to the industry, and we look forward to see what's going on. And our commitment to innovation and also quality of experience will make sure that satellite will stay relevant in this industry. So that's all about my presentation today. If you have any questions, you can come to me or email me at any time. Thank you very much. Thanks. Have a great show.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you very much, Meng. Lots happening, and especially I think that partnership you talked about is really interesting and ties well to what we're talking about today. So that brings us to our first panel. And I'm super pleased to welcome Pete Saladino from Skylo, Ms. Zhu Zheng from China Unicom, and Amelia Liu from Starwind to the stage. Please come on up. Well, as we've seen from the first presentations and obviously the crowd here, I think it's pretty clear that there's so much to talk about. And we've got about half an hour for this panel. And I want to start maybe with a question to each of you, and then we can get into some of the use cases in your business more specifically. But what I'm interested to start off with is sort of, given that we've been talking about satellite for a couple of years now, really as a changing industry, what do you think in the last, and maybe Pete, I can start with you on this, but what do you think has changed in the last 12 months to accelerate some of the momentum we're seeing, whether that's in consumer or other industries?
Well, satellite connectivity has been around for decades. And Skylo is a company that is a commercially available satellite network service that is now in 37 countries and across 5 continents. So we are the largest commercially available satellite direct-to-device service. Over the last year, what's been sort of a big impact on the consumer side is we finally are starting to see consumer devices come to market. Yep. We were proud to be the first partner for Android on Android 15, and we were the satellite partner for the launch of the Pixel 9 series of devices, and that was in past August. We also saw a number of forward-thinking carrier partners like Verizon in the US have really committed to having a robust satellite strategy, and they've partnered with us to enable that. And we followed that with the Galaxy S25 in March of this, or February of this year. So the consumer devices are starting to come to market, yep. And that's a big sort of change versus sort of this whole momentum that has been coming for many years now, and we're finally at that point.
Maybe I can come to you, Mrs. Zhu. Like, from the mobile operator perspective, and China Unicom is a huge company. What for you has changed in the last 12 months about how you see the NTN and satellite opportunity for you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
是这样的，就是其实我们对这个卫星通信的发展，对于我们地面运营商来说，其实我们觉得啊，这个卫星通信的这个引爆，特别是在通信行业，其实它是有一个触发点的。这个触发点来自于什么呢？其实就是那个 Starlink 的这个出现。那 Starlink 的出现，其实给我们了几个启示啊。就第一个就是说，这个卫星组网是可以非常快的，就是而且是面向这个低轨卫星。那么这整个的这个低轨卫星呢，它有它的很好的一个技术优势，比如说它速度非常快，然后它可以面向全球组网，而且它容量大。第二个就是说，其实成本是可以很低的，包括这个发射成本，包括终端的成本。所以说这个它其实是有商业逻辑的。第三点呢，就是说它的商业闭环很快，就是说其实整个卫星通信来说，它是能够形成商业闭环的。所以在这个里面呢，就是也是给我们地面运营商的一些启示啊，就是说其实我们可以基于卫星通信，特别是说对于未来的这个 NTN 以及手机直连是可以为我们来提供服务的。但是如果是从需求上来说呢，就是因为中国也有一些自己的一些发展的一些特点啊，就比如说我们的地面网络非常好，我们的光纤网络也非常好，就基本上能够提供这个能够实现普遍服务了，而且整个网络的这个性能也是非常好的。所以就是基于这个呢，其实我们也认为就是卫星通信它的发展可能会有几个阶段，比如说刚开始我们可以基于存量卫星来给我们提供服务啊，就是说我们可以通过地面的终端上的创新。那现在呢，其实这一类的服务已经出现了，比如说我们手机直连来提供一些短信的类似的一些服务。但是面向未来，我们觉得啊，就更多的是 NTN 来了之后，就是甚至会对我们未来的整个运营商的天地一体融合的组网提供一个新的思路，特别是面向6G。
And Amelia, I know Starwind is in a different part of the industry, making the terminals and that part of the supply chain. You deal with a lot of different industries through your partnerships. What are the big changes in the last 12 months for you?
As you see, as you mentioned, and also ICS mentioned, the current world is experience tremendous changes, especially that is, as you see, the LEO satellite operator and from Starlink, they created a big challenge for the geo satellite operators, and so that is how let the geo satellite and to survive better. Okay, so they have to launch the more HTS. Okay, small beam satellite. Okay, and also for the our China, and you see we have the Shanghai Space Cell and also China Satellite Networks. Okay, the biggest the Chinese LEO satellite operator, they will launch over almost 40,000 LEO satellite. Okay, so for the in order to just provide the seamless connectivity, and that is not only use the such multi-orbit strategy, and also you see, and for our Starwind, for the multi-orbit, we have such terminals and to empower not only the LEO and MEO and the GEO. Okay, so all these terminals and also provide the more applications for the not only the the cell operators, and also the also benefit the end users. That is not only for the land mobility and also the marine and also the air mobility. Besides that, and so with Starwind also, we just working with the telecom operator right now, such as China Mobile, China Mobile International, China Unicom. Okay, and so we already launched the world first sat pad that is integrated the 5G module inside this terminal, very small, very easy to carry. And I hope every audience, you can go to behind you, there are our booths there. Okay, you can see the real products. How is this industry development? How about the trend? Okay, not only for the the past half a year, and also you can see what's the coming future. Okay, what's the technology, and how can we just to deal with that. Okay, in order to bring the more welfare for the all over the world end users.
So clear market momentum, the device ecosystem is starting to come into place. Capacity is growing. We talk about use cases a lot, and those are relevant. I also want to talk about sort of, some of the commercial models and the business models. And Pete, again, I'm interested in Skylo's perspective being one of the first movers here. How should we be thinking about satellite in the consumer space versus in the IoT and business space? And do you see both of those as sort of continuing to grow, or does one face challenges more than the other?
Well, we have three major areas of focus: consumer, IoT, and automotive. Within consumer, we consider both smartphone, but also wearable and other consumer devices like backpack trackers. At CES, there was a Skylo-powered dog tracker. So these are everything that can be connected to RF and to a cellular can be connected to satellite now because of the work we've done and following upon 3GPP release 17 and the integration of NTN into the cellular standards. Now at scale, devices that historically just connected to cellular, can really now connect to satellite as well. And so within automotive, last month we were in Paris where we were working with BMW on our first demonstration of connectivity to automotive. And the automotive sector has a longer lead time for products. But what was notable was that they were using the same antennas as you normally would see. They were not using some giant antenna on the roof of the car. And this speaks to the integration of satellite into the cellular standards. The same types of modems that were connecting in the past are basically now able to connect to satellite when the device has left, or the car in this case has left terrestrial coverage. And then the last one I would say is obviously IoT, which doesn't need much introduction here. That China is a very strong market for IoT. As your research showed, there's some percentage of IoT that is not connected because of terrestrial, and that's a real opportunity for satellite. I like to say that if you think back to grade school, where you learned that 3/4 of the world is covered by ocean, and then you throw in a little bit of Antarctica, a little bit of Asia, a little bit of Africa, and actually 85% of the Earth is not covered by cellular networks. And we think of them as ubiquitous in our daily life. But in real life, across the entire opportunity, which is a B2B opportunity, 85% of the Earth is not covered by networks that can enable this type of asset tracking and business operation and visibility that we've come to expect. And we think that's a big opportunity in IoT.
Yeah, it's very easy. You bring up a good point on, geographic area coverage compared to population coverage. And I think it's very easy for people to sort of forget that even though, mobile phones are owned ubiquitously in most, at least high income countries and many parts of the world generally. I mean, we track, unique subscriber penetration over 70%. So it's huge, but geographic coverage is still a frontier to be filled in, and satellite comes in. Mrs. Xu, I know, it's interesting when we talk about the dynamics in NTN in China versus other parts of the world. And I put up some statistics on the Guowang and some of the other major constellations in China. What do you think is behind so much of the speed of satellite in China specifically? And what lessons can other parts of the world learn?
是这样的，其实对于我们现在来做卫星互联网呢，其实不仅仅是针对于 NTN，就是这个制式来说的，就是像我刚才说到，其实我们整个一条卫星互联网其实也是有几个阶段的。其实第一个阶段呢，就是我们更多的就作为运营商来说，那我们更多的是要运营， 来获得收益，来为我们的用户来服务。所以说，对于第一个阶段，我们是希望能够充分的利用我们天上已有的存量卫星，来为我们的地面不管是 to C、to B 还是 to G、to Home、to H 的这个用户来提供服务。所以在这个阶段呢，我们是希望能够把现在已有的，比如说这个高轨卫星既有的能力能够引入下来。这个时候可能不是说是基于 3GPP 标准的，但是它是能够为用户提供服务的。那么到第二个阶段，呢，那我们更多的是希望能够有这个比较完善的产业链，有比较这个成熟的产品来为我们的用户提供服务。在这个里面的底层逻辑是说，成本能够最优。那么在这个情况下，我们就希望能够充分利用到整个产业链的力量。那么产业链标准化是推动产业链的一个必然的一个方式。所以我们就希望在这个阶段能够利用到我们的 3GPP 的这个标准化对产业链的牵引作用，来就是推进比如说 NTN、IoT 以及 NTN-NR 在我们卫星上面的应用。所以说这个就是对于运营商来说，就是技术是一方面，那么更多的是希望通过技术来达到我们这个面向用户运营推动产业链的这样的一个结果。所以在第二个阶段呢，其实我们是希望能够通过作为我这个角度，我是希望能够通过多星融合的方式来为我们的这个地面用户来提供服务。那多星融合的逻辑是说，未来的这个卫星的这个发展，我们觉得它是有多条路径的。比如说高轨卫星，它会朝着高通量的方向发展；那么低轨卫星，它可能会有 IoT、NTN 就物联网卫星，以及说这个 NTN-NR 的卫星。那么我们希望是能够把这个卫星的能力在地面进行融合，或者在终端侧进行融合。其实刚才 Skylo 他们就是一个比较好的例子，他们把能力在地面在终端侧进行融合来提供服务。那么第三个阶段，我觉得就未来我们是希望天地一体能够融合发展。那么融合发展这个里面就有一个大的逻辑，就是说我希望能够面向未来，基于标准化 NTN 的这种方式，能够实现天地互补的这种图网方式。一方面是在部署的时候能够是成本最优的，同时在为用户提供服务的时候是产业链最丰富的，而且成本最低的。
One of the things that I think is important, we've got about 15 minutes and we'll come to the outlook, but I do want to talk, and Amelia, I'll get your opinion on this. Like when we talk about the device ecosystem and standards, I think there's a generally accepted point that the more you have common standards, that you can have cheaper equipment and a higher addressable market because people can work to the same specification. But do you think that like there's a risk of any fragmentation in terms of standards, either for terminals or other devices that may make expanding satellite connectivity take longer or be more expensive, or do you see things going on the right track there?
As for the standards, okay, I just want to mention firstly about the baseband system, okay, because you know the different site operator, I mean the geo site operator, they use the different modem right now, okay, such as the ST Engineering, Hughes, Gilat, Space Bridge, okay, Comtech, etc. Okay, and also for the LEO site operator, they use some other, you know, the modem system. Okay, that is really not very convenient for the end users. And I think for this industry, because the 3GPP standard will be implemented very soon, that is bring the very good advantages for the common users. Okay, and for the electronic steering phase array terminal, that is a quite different story, because you see for the because there is many, you know, the demands scenario, a different, you know, application, and for the HTS geo satellite and also the LEO, so it's not easy to make the, you know, such like the ESA terminal, electronic steering phase array terminal in the same standard, because they have the different demands, and you have to just customize, just like our Starwing, and we work with China Satcom and to empower their consumer market, okay, by using our KA band, the ESA 30. This is open the consumer market, but for this smaller ESA terminal, that is cannot be used for some other, the geocell operator. For example, we want to work with other customers. So their satellite is not very as powerful as the HTS satellite. So they cannot use the very small, the ESA terminal. They have to use the medium or the bigger size, okay? And so that is really just, quite different, okay, for the ESA terminal in the same standard. Because the market is there, and also for the data, the different needs also just bring the such, the different demands like this.
We've talked about the last 12 months. We've talked about the device ecosystem. We've talked about regional differences between China and other parts of the world. When you look at this, when you look at satellite, the industry itself, Pete, you guys are a part of this. You work with many providers as partners. I think a question we get asked a lot is, how many constellations can the world support? Are we going to see consolidation over time? Does Starlink and AST and Kuiper and all these others continue to sort of coexist in parallel? How, from your perspective, how do you see the next sort of 3 to 5 years in that context, and what will determine sort of who wins, as it were, in terms of the satellite providers over time, and what are the big factors we should be watching?
Well, I think, everyone wants to know what's going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years. That's going to determine the shape of the market. I think key things to watch are, the evolution of regulatory frameworks is very important. Many of the solutions that are being proposed don't have really clear, they have very strong standards. Yep. 3GP release 19 in particular has satellite connectivity embedded in the standard. Yep. However, that satellite connectivity does not have a regulatory framework that works almost anywhere in the world. Yep. And so there's not just about standards-based for direct-to-device. There's an aspect related to regulatory fit. Yep. And right now in the United States, there's supplemental coverage from space, which is a new framework for allowing some of the competitors that you mentioned are able to do some beta programs and testing. But we've been able to get to global scale because of our embrace of MSS spectrum, which mobile satellite service spectrum has been around for decades and has an existing regulatory framework that's in place from the old satellite phone days. And the way we think about it is we are turning devices, whether automobiles or smartphones or wearables, into sort of mini satellite phones. And they're using existing frameworks of regulatory that's already around the world. And that's a much easier path. So by embracing the 3GPP release standards, which is, I think we're the first to do that at scale, we believe that we're enabling all of the device makers, of which there are many here that we're eager to talk to in Asia. The device makers can empower their own product roadmaps. Yep. Relatively easily, because it's very familiar to the way that they like to work, because of the 3GPP standards already have that, that's their normal go-to-market process. So over the next 3 to 5 years, I would watch the evolution of how the new amazing satellites that are being launched, what their approaches are to fit within regulatory environments. Yep. All around the world. Yep. I think that's a key aspect that does not get spoken about as much, because we talk about standards. Yep. But if the standards don't meet the government's needs, yep, they're two different groups, the yep, industry group and the government group. Yep. And those are very important aspects to consider.
100%. And we're gonna talk about some of the regulatory questions in the second panel. I think there's a lot. There's spectrum questions. There's questions on whether there is regulation of satellite companies being communication providers or similar to, and then that don't currently exist on the satellite industry that would have an impact that we need to all understand. And Emilia, did you want to chime in on this question as well in terms of how you see the sort of the broader ecosystem and how that may change over time?
Okay, I like to just oversee the coming future. Okay, and because you know, for our satellite industry, actually, and just solving the last mile, you know, the connectivity, you know, the issue. But not only that, right now, and we just you know, converge with telecom operators. Okay, and it is not only D2D, okay, direct to device, but also, and we just you know, like I mentioned just now, our iPad, okay, that is can be used inside the room, and also by using the 5G networks, okay, and outside they can use the KU HTI satellite or the KU LEO, okay. That is a trend because people like it, and this is bring their more simple and easy, you know, the operations, and also the more convenience. And thirdly, this is concerning about in the future that is AI driven, and we are just working with, you know, the robotic industries, okay. That is a pan robotic. So, for example, there is a robotic dogs that can on the surface of the robotic box can put our, you know, the Ether terminal, and to working also with, you know, the 5G networks, okay, and in the city area or in the some, you know, the with the service area, okay, and then it can still can use, you know, the telecom operator service. But in the remote and the underserved area, it of course it can use you know, the satellite, especially the HTSGO and also the LEO. So this is you know, one application scenarios. And besides that, recently, you know, with China, you know, just implement, you know, the low altitude economy, okay. That is need to you know, to utilize the more unmanned aerial vehicle, okay. So that is also can, because in order to have the better control of for example the city's transportation management, okay. So that is a need the 5G and also the satellite to work better together, okay. And also for some emergency or rescue,
yeah,
and also for some disaster relief, that is also necessary, and it played a very critical roles, okay. So besides that, for the unmanned UAV, unmanned shipping vessel, unmanned vehicle, okay. So all these you know, scenario can be used, you know, the satellite in order to not only to just to do the communication, but okay, and then the satellite communication also need to integrate with navigation and telemetry and measurement. This is also just providing the signal processing solution, yep, for the you know, the end users. So all the ecosystem, they will just like the you know, the converge, yep, connectivity and creation, like the same, okay, yeah, of MWC, okay. Yeah. So I think that's all.
Cool. We've got just under 5 minutes left, and I've got a question sort of just to wrap up, and maybe if we can have brief responses. But Mrs. Zhu, like in China, when can we expect people to be having satellite service enabled on their phones, and how do you see the commercialization timelines over the next sort of 2 to 3 years?
这个我觉得是这样的啊，就是说，现在其实在国内已经就从去年开始，其实去年我也参加这个 pilot， 去年开始我们已经实现了这个手机直连的这样的一个服务，但实际上，从我们现在发展的这个情况来看呢，这个卫星业务对于 to C 的用户来说，就是 to C 的这个消费者来说， 它其实是地面通信的一个叠加。这个叠加就是说它不是必须的，它是 the more the better， 就是有它可能会更好。所以说从这个角度上来说呢，我是觉得在现在这个情况下，就是在现有的这个能力下，它可能是一个附加业务。当然随着卫星互联网的发展，就是比如说我们的技术的演进，因为现在技术的迭代特别快，这个技术不仅仅是说通信技术，因为整个卫星产业的发展，它其实产业链非常长，比我们做地面通信的产业链要长很多。我们地面通信可能有设备有终端，然后整个网搭好了，这个产业链可能起来，但卫星产业链非常长，就是它有卫星制造环节，有发射环节，每一个环节的发展都是决定了这个卫星互联网的发展。所以在这么长的产业链里面，我如果是说这个整个产业链发展起来之后，整个卫星的能力起来之后，这个可能就是至少在这个中国对于这个卫星通讯对于用户的这个定位来说才会发生变化。在这个阶段可能它是一个附加的，那么随着它的能力增强，能够跟地面网络在国内形成互补的话，在这个情况下，有可能它能变成大家通信的一个必选项。当它成为必选项之后，这个产业才会慢慢的循环起来，因为它有经济效益的带动，它能带着产业链全面的发展，同时就像刚才说的，有这个整个标准化的支撑，能让这个产业链朝着一个标准去发展去循环。这样的话，我理解这个产业链才能够真正的这个发展起来。
Pete, maybe the last question to you, the last word to you. We talked about the 3 to 5 year path, and that's one thing, but in the modern world, 6 months is a long time, even 12 months is a long time. So looking over the next year, and just quick lightning style question, what's the single biggest thing you think we should be watching for in terms of the telco-satellite path over the next 12 months?
Well, over the last few months, we've been getting our first real data from consumers as they're activating. And we launched Satellite SOS in August of last year and followed by Satellite SMS shortly thereafter. It's now in US, Canada, and Europe, and just went to Australia recently with the Google Pixel 9. We're seeing now every other day, consumers are being, messages are being routed from consumers to emergency services. Yep. And I'm reading reports about amazing impacts on people's lives. Yeah. And I'm starting, you see this data about how this is really impacting real consumers. Yeah. And I think that's sort of gets us over the hump, where the impact in consumers' lives is real. Yeah. And mobile operators around the world want to have that peace of mind for their consumers and provide those services, because we've found a way that we think is they're able to provide that at a low price. On your data earlier, Verizon is offering our service for free to consumers. And so as this begins to sort of take hold, we believe that this is how it starts to scale. Yeah. We have a number of work going on in Europe to bring this types of services now to Europe. And we're eager to work with device makers and mobile network operators here in China and throughout Asia for the same.
Lots to think about, and as ever, we could talk all day on this. There's so much, but I just want to thank you guys very much for being on this panel and bringing all your great perspectives. It was super great. Welcome back for part 2 of our Satellite and NTN Summit. Thanks everybody for staying. I know there's still people coming in. There's a couple of spare seats if you want to take them. Otherwise, you're welcome to stand around. So we had some great content in the first part. What we're going to do now is move to a lot of the satellite implementation, the deployment models. We're going to talk about innovation in the technology. We're going to have a keynote first from our speaker from China Mobile, and then we'll have a panel to wrap it up after that. So without further ado, I want to introduce Mr. Deng from China Mobile.
我这里用中文来讲啊，对。自己翻啊。今天和大家分享一下，就是关于5G 6G 天地一体这块我们的一些思考，还有一些实践的。首先我们还是要看一下这个我们说的天地一体网。我们说的天地一体网其实包含了天上有高中低轨，还有地面，把它融合在一起。但是我们要考虑啊，这张网 它的价值，对，其实我们最早的时候，很早以前啊，应该就是80年代的时候已经有民用的卫星网，当时的卫星网呢，它可能主要做的场景呢，就是在我们认为是有4个传统的场景的，就是主要做一些物联网的，还有像一些无人区的，还有一些像特殊场景的海面啊、航空啊等等，还有应急。所以我们以前一直认为卫星的传统场景是应急场景、特殊场景的。但是我们认为啊，就是卫星网要让它的价值提升的话，可能不能局限于传统的几个场景的，因为这几个场景其实我们可以看出来，卫星网从它刚开始的时候和地面网大概都是，地面蜂窝网都是80年代开始的，当时可能地面网我们也只处于1G 状态，但是我们现在地面网已经到5G 了，已经马上要到6G 了，但是卫星网它的进步其实比较慢的啊，就是因为它覆盖的场景的价值不大，市场不大，市场规模不大，产业进步也就相对缓慢，所以我们认为啊，通过技术进步，通过卫星网的性价比不断提升，它的应用场景应该是不断的扩大的，应用场景和它的价值和它的性价比是同步提升的，就是性价比不断提升，它的应用场景应该不断的增大，对，所以我们认为，在天地一体而言，5G、6G 天地一体网这张网的场景而言的话，应该有4个新的场景，我们认为啊，像有低空的，还有一带一路的，还有手机直连的，然后最后一个场景，我觉得还有就是说对地面做补充覆盖啊，因为我以前是做地面覆盖的，地面覆盖我们其实可以把它分成3个区域啊，第一个区域是地面网络没有覆盖的区域的，就是类似于像无人区或者低价值的区域的。这部分区域其实可能能占到，像中国啊，能占到50%的区域可能都没有覆盖地面覆盖。第二呢是低流量区域的，就是这些区域像西部农村啊，然后第3个区域呢就是高流量区域的。其实我们认为啊，卫星它随着发射成本、制造成本的不断降低啊，它其实逐渐的具备去做第2个场景覆盖的能力。我把这个第2个场景把它定义成说地面补充覆盖这个场景的。它之所以能干这件事情，还是因为技术进步了啊，技术进步是我们场景扩大的一个根源啊。现在我们说提了天地一体，确实是因为手机直连卫星的技术和产业不断的进步和成熟，使卫星网和地面网相向而起，融合在一体了。所以现在我们看到啊，5G 就是我们地面移动通信啊，5G 和6G 已经把天地一体作为了这2个系统的核心能力了。相向而行啊，这是我们说的，地面网已经往卫星网上走了的。然后，而卫星网而言呢，在今年ITO 5月份的会上，就是 WP 4B 的会上，也把5G NTN 技术定位成 ITO 认同的唯一的卫星技术，这是第一次的啊。因为4G 的时候定义的也是一个卫星技术，但是到 5G 阶段。NTN 技术成为了 ITO 认同的唯一的一个6G 技术5G 技术，我相信到6G 的时候，6G NTN 应该也会被 ITO 认同为一个卫星技术。我就说，这就是相向而行的一个结果。可以说，技术2者已经融为一体了。技术融合了之后，就会产业融合。所以我们说，这天地一体啊，就是技术和产业都会融合的。而这个发生这个变化，就是因为手机直连卫星来了啊。因为手机用户是地面运营上的传统用户啊，对， 所以传统的地面运营商也要去做天和地融合在一起的网络的。这里也介绍一下，就是因为其实业界做手机直连卫星还是3种传统的技术，现在做的应该说比较流行的应该还是前面2种啊，就是我们认为就是说纯量手机直连就不用改终端，这种技术确实是在美国用的比较多。第二类就是 3GPP-NTN 的，它要改终端，其实从性能上来说啊，肯定是改了的更好的，虽然说它可能终端这块发展会比较慢一点，但是3GPP-NTN 技术啊改完了之后，它有一个非常关键的一个技术，就是它支持跳波数技术。因为有了跳波数技术之后，我们能看到卫星建设的数量和规模可以大幅度的降低，对吧？就是说你要建一张可以商业闭环的网络啊，这个技术是非常关键的。而且性能这块，因为终端做了一些像抗时延还有抗多普勒频片的一些技术啥的，终端性能也能大幅的提升。所以我去年也来讲过，我觉得3GPP-NTN 技术应该是未来的主流技术，我现在还是这样认为啊。从这个发展来看啊，我知道产业逐渐从第一种技术也逐渐往第2种技术上靠拢的。最前面讲了，就是之所以我说场景啊，我们现在关注的是，比较关注啊，不是第一个场景，就是地面没有覆盖无人区特殊场景这种区域，我们不是特别关注。为啥？这一场景本来就是低价值场景的，我们地面也不去覆盖的，或者有些地方我们覆盖不了的，像航空航海的。然后我们比较关注的是第2个区域，可以用卫星做地面补充覆盖的区域。这种区域随着它卫星成本的降低，它可能够跟地面匹敌了。但是它有个好处呢，它可以除了覆盖国内，还可以做全球覆盖。所以这个区域啊，我们关注了之后，我们看全球的，就是国外的吧，国外的主流运营商也关注这个区域啊，对吧？就是关注这种场景，对吧？其实我以前可能有4G 覆盖的区域，地面4G 覆盖的区域，我可能5G 我不去覆盖了，我用卫星来覆盖啊。从容量来看的话，其实卫星的容量还不太高，它可能只能做刚才提的第2个场景的，就容量高的场景还不能做的。但是确实是通过计算来看的话，卫星的制造发射成本快要接近可以做这个场景的一个水平了。也是基于前面我们看到技术产业发展的一个趋势而言的话，中国移动啊对天地一体就是非常非常关注啊，对，我们也是积极的去推进，应该说是从技术上、从产业上、从应用上都会去推进这个天地一体手机直连，对吧？从应用上来说，我们是在去年11月份的时候，联合中国时空公司，发布了手机直连北斗卫星提供的手机直连的短信业务，现在大概已经有几十万用户了的，也有差不多20-30款终端已经支持了的，在手机直连语音业务而言的话，我们现在也在做积极的一些测试，主要这个还是基于天龙1号，然后再做。等到政策许可之后，我们也会为用户提供相应的手机卫星电话业务的。这是应用方面，然后在技术方面，我们刚才提了，我们觉得 NTN 应该还是一个主流的技术，所以对于高轨卫星它提供载带语音而言的话，我们也是做了一些像基于 IoT NTN 做了一个语音方案，对这个方案做了一些改造吧，这相关的一些改造啊，涉及到核心网还有无线网，我们现在也正在做3GPP 的一些标准化的一些工作的。然后对于中轨和低轨而言，尤其是低轨我们都知道动辄要申请的星座可能几万颗，像 Starlink 大概4万多颗，我们国内的星座也大概1万多颗，其实成本很高的。但是我们觉得啊，其实天和地两张网既然融合在一起，可能大家就要互补啊。 地面有覆盖的地方，我其实可能不太需要天上再覆盖了，不需要做重叠的覆盖。所以我们说，天和地啊还是要融为一体。我们讲的是用一套技术体系一步终端，然后还有统一的频率，然后实现一张网。我们希望把天和地这2张网捏合在一起 ，converge 到一张网的。要捏合在一起的话，我们这里也提了一些技术啊，比如说需要天和地做一些连续性的一些技术增强的，就是说它要有一些互操作能够保证用户体验。还有就是刚才提了，我们要做一些天和地的频率的一些共享的。那频率共享的话，那可能会涉及的一些干扰。那这些干扰性的一些问题啊，怎么样用技术来解决的？还有，天和地既然是一张网的话，我们要做统一的一个资源的管控，对吧？就是把天和地的资源当成是一套资源来统一管控。其实这套技术做完了之后啊，我们预估啊，就是星座设计这块的话，应该说可以用一个很轻量化的一个星座，就可以实现一个天和地连续性的一张网络，对吧？这个确实是，是比较容易做商业闭环。就是刚才我说的，你替代一部分地面低流量区域，那就可以做商业闭环，有利于快速的建设一张低成本的一个低轨星座的。最后一方面呢，其实要建一张星座的话，其实测试是非常关键的。其实我们也都知道，现在不管是像国外的星座还是国内的星座，你在做之前，其实都要做大量的一些实验测试。但是你做实验测试这个成本是非常高的，你要发心，你要资金成本还有时间成本。所以我们也是联合复旦大学啊，然后做了一套天和地数字孪生的一套系统，我们把它叫做星地至深数字孪生系统。这其实干2件事儿。第一件事情就是，我们在做实验室测试的时候，我们有一个叫做桌面联调。桌面联调会把终端基站、核心网等等啊，还有同步系统、所有的测控系统全部放在一个桌面上，非常复杂。而我们这个系统呢，它可以把基站后端的设备都模拟出来，然后当我们测试的时候，只需要有这套系统还有基站新到模拟器终端 ，OK 就能很快速的搭这个网络。我们在做实验室桌面联调的时候，当时搭这个环境大概搭了1个月，就是非常复杂的。这是它第一个功能，可以使我们实验室桌面联调的效率提升。第二呢，我们可以基于几颗实验星，就可以把整个星座模拟出来，对吧？所以这个是可以提前的把整个星座的性能模拟出来，提前发现这个星座设计的问题，对吧？提前发现这个星座的一些性能，对，所以我们觉得这个是对于这个高效率去建设一张低轨星座啊，也是非常关键的，对吧？这也是今天我们下午刚发布的一个系统的，主要介绍就是这些啊，这几个方面。第一个就是我们对天地一体的一个理解，第二，中国移动也是非常积极的在推进这件事情，因为6G 肯定是天地一体的一个网络的。然后我们从技术上、产业上、应用上都全方位的在推进，也是希望跟整个产业界一起联合来推进这件事情。好，谢谢大家，我的介绍就是这些。
Thank you very much, Mr. Wei. Great insights as ever, and I, from the world's largest operator, it says a lot to see all of the things you're doing with this technology. Okay, as I said, we've talked about a lot, but we are going to have one final great panel, and we're going to be focusing on the innovation pipeline. So please help me welcoming Daniel Lee from Nordic Semiconductor, Mr. I-Kang Fu from MediaTek, and my colleague, Barbara Pareglio from the GSMA. Well, guys, thank you again for joining us on stage here and bringing all your insights. when we had the discussion in the first part of the session, there was so much on the market momentum that's happening in satellite and telco. We talked about use cases. We talked about the sort of business models. I want to get into with this panel some of the technology side of it. I want to talk more about the device and the chipset ecosystem. We have two experts here from there. I think it would be interesting to talk a little bit about sort of regulation and some of the questions around, the spectrum models being used and how we look at those going forward. And then wrapping that all up into a kind of, what do we think in terms of what this means for, service delivery of different types of services, text, voice, and mobile internet eventually. So we got plenty to get through. We got about 40 minutes. Again, I want to make sure we cover lots of ground. So Daniel, maybe I can start with you. When we talk about innovation in the pipeline, with satellite technology, and I know you are in the semiconductor industry, what do you see as sort of looking ahead? What are the key areas within technology innovation we should be focusing on to scale this to a larger base?
All right. Thank you, GSMA, and thank you, team. So I think from a semiconductor point of view is this is actually a new standard set by 3GPP. But for Nordic itself, we have been looking into this technology NTN IoT for quite a long time. Yep. So really since last year when this 3GPP standardization has come for NTN IoT, we have done various of product itself in terms of the chipsets, in terms of the firmware, in terms of to get the chipset into a modulation, to get it to a final product for the end ODMs, OEMs to use. But this market has really grown quite rapidly. I think by days, I think Skylo has mentioned, rather than by year. So we have done our best to keep up with the 3GPP standard. And with our latest hardware, which is the 9151, which is the NB-IoT, LTM/NTN support, I think we have done quite a good achievement in the past year to get the 3GPP standard of R17 integrated into our chipset today. Yeah. So.
MediaTek is one of the world's biggest chip makers. I think, just maybe a high-level question first. Same question. Key areas of innovation, either at the chipset level or others, we should be looking at in the near future to help scale satellite and connectivity?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I don't know if the speaker works.
I think
okay.
Should be okay.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I think we have been working on this since 2019. We are the first company success. We proved the IoT and TN connect to the GeoSatellite. We work with Imaset. Before that, nobody believed that. We are also leading the re-7 project in 3GPP, do all the feasibility evaluation. So to us, we do learn a lot from the satellite operator a lot. And then we learned there is a huge gap between the mobile ecosystem and the satellite ecosystem. And to us, the journey is actually identify what is the difference between these two and see how come we can do the system design to close the gap. So we found that the mobile technology after the 3G, 4G, 5G, we have a very condensed competition. The technology evolved very fast. Now the satellite technology, just like what China Mobile mentioned, it has been much outperformed than the Satcom technology. But people are wondering whether we can really leverage the mobile ecosystem to help the satellite ecosystem. And what we learned that is that actually we found we are the first one we proved it is. We can do that. So I can say the mobile phone feature, we have a lot of a portfolio. So the real exciting one is that we try to investigate how those mobile features can help to improve the satellite system performance. So some challenging from the satellite operator perspective, they say they have been struggling this problem for decades. But to us, it's a common problem in the mobile ecosystem, like interference cancellation, interference coordination. Yeah. especially when people recently discussed whether we can share the spectrum between the satellite and the mobile. And the mobile network have a lot of experience to handling that. So 3GPP is actually contributing a lot of good technology component to help mobile operator to resolve the problem. And then we eventually bring that to the commercialization. So I would say that this system capability exploration to see how the mobile technology can help the satellite communication, that is the most exciting part.
Barbara, you have an industry-wide view, and you manage the an NTN community. From your perspective, at a technology level, what are the big things we should be watching for?
So yeah, as you mentioned, we are working with quite a few companies, including also some of the company here. And it's right, satellite has been evolving very slowly. It's been very efficient for doing the things where they were needed to be done. And the technology, the hardware, the capabilities, and also the terrestrial network, but also the devices have been evolved a lot. So nowadays, I think the most exciting is how to adopt or how to learn from what has been done on the terrestrial network, how we can bring it to the satellite. So I wouldn't say it's completely new technology. Of course, I would say there's also AI that helps on the satellite, and it's more on the management also of the capabilities that you have on a satellite. And I think this is more looking when we get to the regenerative payload rather than a transparent one. But also the orchestration is quite important. So we're going to get much more satellite. So orchestration is going to be quite important. But from the technology perspective is also, as you mentioned, how we leverage the 3GPP in order to actually bring scale, speed, and simplicity, performances. So how we bring that to a good level by leveraging what we already know from the terrestrial to the satellite. So it's a bit of a both new technology, but also what we already have to bring it up to the future evolution of the satellite.
You brought up AI, and that was going to be my next question. Around the whole event, you'll see AI everywhere. We saw that in our Barcelona MWC. Obviously, that is the sort of key shift in the tech industry, and when we talk about satellite and terrestrial connectivity, that's no different. Daniel, coming back to you, I mean, from your business, can you give examples of how you are using AI to improve service delivery, and how do you think that might change looking ahead in the next 12 months?
Yeah, actually, it's a very good question. I think if you guys saw the news yesterday, I think Nordic just acquired a new AI company. Yep. So it's a right place at the right time. So one thing we are certain is Nordic is very serious about AI. And I think with our wireless product portfolio, from all the way from Bluetooth, from Wi-Fi, from cellular, and from like PMIC, etc. Everything we're gonna do, we should be very focused on AI, tiny ML, AI sort of intelligence. By acquiring this new company, is really showing the market is in terms of the software developments, in terms of a standard SDK, in terms of open CPU solutions. We will definitely surround everything around the AI. But saying this, also what Barbara already mentioned about NTN IoT, right? For a lot of the remote areas, let's say into the no man land, right, where you doesn't have the terrestrial network to do the coverage, to do the center transformation. But now with the NTN IoT, we can cover a lot of the no man land, which you could use the IoT devices to gather data, to gather environment data like forest monitoring. Can we use the AI to do a local sort of data collection and data resourcing? But I think that we will be all using AI in the future to diagnose those data, turn into a good use case. But overall, Nordic, every portfolio we have, we will definitely have AI as part of our important, like what we have in the ultra low power, but also AI as part of it. Yeah.
I-Kang as well. I mean, from MediaTek's perspective, how do you see the intersection between AI and satellite technology?
Yeah, I think in general, there is like a AI for the communication or the communication for AI. Yeah. So they are totally two different scenarios. Let's talk about maybe for the AI for satellite communication. Indeed, in the satellite communication, there are certain areas that AI can help. For example, on this orbit prediction, because of course a satellite operator will provide you the information. Of course, when you use a smartphone, you don't need to point the array antenna to the right direction, so it's much easier. But if you go to the higher frequency, go to the KUKF, and your antenna array need to steer the beam to the satellite. And we have done the experiment with several satellite operator, and we do understand sometimes until you point the beam to the right direction, basically you hear nothing. So having the right understanding on where is a satellite is very critical to get a connection set up. So the AI, or you can say the prediction algorithm, is one of the area how the AI can help the connectivity. And of course, when the connectivity is everywhere, not just in the popular like a dense area, even for the remote area, and that coverage certainly provide the AI have a broader penetration to more use case. So I would say it's a bilateral, either AI for connectivity or connectivity for AI. I think they can help each other.
Barbara, do you want to chime in on this?
No, as I said, so the two aspects that we look in also GSMA, but also in the standard. So standard is trying to look at how to support AI for the networks, how to improve the connectivity aspects in different way, from the terminal to the air interface, to the device, to the edge. Yep. And then there is also the other sides of the network supports AI. Yep. In fairness, I would say if we're looking at the satellite capability at the moment, particularly on a direct-to-device, we have to be careful what we can do. I mean, we are at the beginning of the journey. And as you can see also from the slide before, we only are at the level of SMS or very simple calls. Yep. So we still have to do a lot of work to get there, but at least we can use it for simple services.
And I guess it's a good segue into how you connect the technology into service delivery. And so, a question we often get asked from the largest global technology companies, very, very big, well-known. I won't name names, but they're asking, if we're talking about a 5G network in the sky, what does that mean in practice? So I'm interested to get your opinions on what kind of innovation do we need to see in order to have satellite be able to deliver not just emergency SMS, but voice calls and internet browsing and maybe even video eventually. I mean, is that something that is realistic, or do we think that's still sort of years away? I mean, what do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, probably a few years when you ask that question, a lot of people say probably about 10 years or a few years away, right? Yeah. But now, I think the reality will come quicker, okay? Mm-hmm. But how quick, I can't comment on the time. Yep. But really, as of now, one thing I can really comment is from Nordic point of view, because we are focused very much on the IoT itself. Yep. For large data streaming like video, like voice, we are not the expert, but again, the IoT side, we will see by the time when this standard will move into R19, R20 or beyond, we will see the terrestrial and the non-terrestrial will become sort of a mix and match. Yep. In the way for certain applications, which will bring more use cases into the market. And but the whole ecosystem, I think it will take some time for the maturity to get to the level where the terrestrial is now, right? Where you have 5G, high level video streaming. But for NTN IoT, it will become soon. Okay, Tim, it will become soon. My personal reckoning will be about 12 to 18 months. We will see new chipsets coming, more satellites being launched into the sky, more NTN sports, like Satellite, company like Skylo, Ethereum, Mariota, they will become much more focused onto the new standard. So this will become much sooner than we expect.
Yeah.
And from a semiconductor point of view, we will definitely on the right path to simultaneously to follow the application, follow the leads, follow the consultancy company, what they do on the sky. Yeah.
And actually, just a quick follow-up. I know Nordic's, as you say, Nordic's focus is in the IoT area, and I've showed some data from our research earlier, and you know, what do you, within the industry portfolio, whether that's logistics or manufacturing, do you see any of those industries as further ahead in terms of adopting this technology, or how should we think about that?
Yeah, if you look at the overall market right now, where the demands are come from, or where the requests come from for NTN IoT, I believe one of the key segments will be asset tracker. Okay, when we talk about asset trackers, it depends to personal tracker, industrial tracking, cross the region, global tracking. Okay, but I really think it's about to fulfill the gap where the terrestrial network cannot cover. For example, like Africa, etc., right? Where you have a one belt, one road, right? Those sort of trackings where previous years was really rely on the 2G technology itself. Yep. But now with the 2G sunset has really taken to place in certain regions, we have to rely on the traditional LTE. But with the NTN coming to place now, that can really fulfill a lot of the gray areas. We have to have no coverages. So my personal reckon will be asset tracking will be one of the key areas. But again, remote monitoring, right, into no man land, into a forest or into a desert sort of locations, that will be a key area where you can create many new sort of use cases where you can use the NTN IoT for the data, so the transmissions. Yeah.
And Barbara, I mean, we have talked at MWC Barcelona, we've talked about it here within the IoT space, and again, you have a huge range of contacts with satellite companies and telco companies. What do you see as sort of the priority verticals, as it were, the low-hanging fruit there, and connect that back to the service delivery question of, you know, can we look at those use cases for, is it just low power applications, or is it higher bandwidth stuff? How should we think about that?
So for the IoT, obviously the satellite company, when they already serve IoT, that is a natural extension. Yep. And actually it's also extended to have more customers. And it has to do also with the service offerings, the quality, maybe the price point and the availability. So those are traditionally, as you mentioned, could be logistics, could be tracking, mining, open mining, obviously, oil, gas, all those areas, they're going to be hugely popular. But the one that you also see coming up is automotive. Maybe it's more a European need, or I don't know, but we also have to have a support of being able to send emergency alert or messages or call. But they are good enough at the beginning to send a message, because if you have no connectivity, you're not able even to send it in the message. And it's a little bit connected to the regulatory environment also. So the automotive now is picking up a lot. They would like to use NTN for those type of services at first. Yep. But they don't want to stop there, so they want to go further on the journey. So this is the area where we see quite some interest, particularly on the IoT. But also, as we saw in the presentation before, don't forget that the MBIoT, which was born for low power type of devices for IoT, now is also going to be supported for doing a voice call on your phone. Yep. So is how to leverage what we already have for adding on capabilities for everyone. Yeah. So that will also leverage not just the IoT, but all the consumers. Some work still have to happen because we need to adapt to the IMS. IMS is, so the work is ongoing through GBP, but that you can also use it to see what you could do then on consumers. So that is already broadening the opportunity. And the biggest country, obviously, where they're geographically huge, but the population is concentrated in a certain area, those are traditionally already very well suited, and they work already with satellite. So those are the first one where they also require, to use it and expand it to IoT services, but right now it's not possible to.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about some of the headline innovation. We've talked about the service pathway, and link that to IoT. I-Kang, I want to come back to you. I have a question on the sort of device landscape. You guys come from the chipset industry. I think there's a lot of questions on when some of the major, handset manufacturers, Apple, Samsung, Honor, Xiaomi, others, when they will incorporate NTN connectivity into their portfolios. Apple obviously has a partnership with Globalstar to, work in emergency SMS natively to iPhones. But when you look across the OEM landscape, how should we think about when they will adopt NTN into their portfolio?
It's a good question. As you may know, we are the first company to provide the 5G NTN smartphone in the world. Our experience is that it's actually very simple. This is a smartphone. You want to connect it to the satellite. Satellite doesn't change, but you remove the bulky antenna. So you have a 10 dB loss. So how do you recover that? That's the whole question. So that different technology route. And of course, right now, all the satellite operators want to arrive their signal on the smartphone because you have a multi-billion volume every year. So they are quite willing to invest, or you can even say a little bit sacrifice their satellite performance in order to optimize the connection to fit with a smartphone. So as you can see from the current mega constellation, the trend is that you got a bigger and bigger antenna array on the satellite payload in order to recover the link budget from the smartphone. So of course, the first one we success in 2020, we are using this IMASET satellite, and of course, Skylo, they are also the first connecting with our smartphone. Over the geo-satellite, we found that the trick to recover this link budget gap from the satellites, we try to squeeze the signal bandwidth as small as possible. Because you only have 23 dB and transmit power, there's no magic. It's all physics. So the only thing you can do, you squeeze the spectrum bandwidth, then you boosting the power spectral density, then you recover the link budget, and that's all. So after the message, and if you want to have like a higher and higher audio, video streaming, of course you need a higher and higher data rate. And there are only two solutions. If you don't want to change your smartphone, the first one, you lower the satellite altitude. It's that simple. You change a LEO satellite from GEO to LEO, that you give you around like a 20 dB gain. And the second one is that you try to increase the antenna size. Then you sharpen your beamforming, like concentrate your energy. Then you get maybe another 10 dB back. And of course, like some satellite company, they try to, because the satellite is actually very power limited. So the ERP budget, transmitting power available from the satellite is actually very limited. So how to increase the solar panel size on the satellite payload is also important. So we can see a lot of a satellite, not just operator, but also manufacturer, trying to advance their satellite payload more and more advanced. But they don't want to change the smartphone. No. Because this is a target they try to survive the connection. So our vision is that the single device we can connect into both terrestrial and non-terrestrial network. And because when you say when you say like China Mobile say, in the 6G you want to integrate the whole from the space and from the ground. So the key is actually on the device. You need to have a multi-mode device able to connect to all the network. Then you can harmonize the network. So that's why MediaTek, we are not just doing the silicon, but we're trying to do the whole system. We talk to all the satellite operator, manufacturer. We understand how they try to build their constellation. Then we know what they need on our silicon. Then we see how we can build a device to fulfill all their requirements. So that is what we are trying to do.
Yeah, I think in terms of Nordic is probably much less easier than MediaTek is. we are very fortunate to use the 3GPP standard for the R17 to integrate on the existing bands or the software flexibility on the current NB-IoT, right?
Yeah.
So that has really helped us to go to much quicker into the market to offer a chipset or a module to the end customer, which they can connect to Skylo, to connect to all these Geo or Leo providers in the market today. But again, this is really a start. But when you're trying to get the terrestrial or the non-terrestrial into a seamless handover, right, where you can fulfill within the non-gray area, that will be the key challenge, which I think it will take some time to get to the seamless sort of connectivity you want. But again, this is something which Nordic itself, we do something very well is we spend a lot of time on the firmware. We develop the chipset, we develop our own firmwares. So we work with various of satellite providers, trying to help them to get into their sort of a new standard, which is a 3GPP standard, global network for IoT, for voice, etc. But this is all because of the standard which the 3GPP has bring, right? Yeah. But you guys probably already know this, is satellite has not been around since yesterday. It has been around many, many years. Yep. But privately, they do their own sort of OEMs, the hardware, the satellite itself. But now the standard has come in. Now the traditional satellite companies are willing to invest into the local base station, the EMB. So that has enabled our job to be much more easier because we follow the standardization. Yeah, so this ecosystem, the more we further go down, I think it's going to be much more easier for us to have a new chipsets next generation as soon as possible to do more bandwidth, to do much more high volume, the mass volume, to fulfill the area of the terrestrial, to get much more closer to the terrestrial coverage. Yeah.
Barbara, this kind of leads us to the regulatory question, because there are clear dependencies or linkages, whatever you want to call them, between the type of spectrum model being used and how services are delivered and how long they take to come to market. We talked about it a little bit in the opening panel, but again, from your perspective, on a regulation level, what are some of the key issues or questions we need to be talking about, again, in the next 12 to 24 months, say?
So you also presented in your slides with that two main area. So one is the traditional mobile satellite spectrum, and don't forget there's also the fixed spectrum for broadband. Yep. But I think most of the question always goes to the mobile aspect. Yep. For the direct to cells, which is the one more contentious to talk about it. So there is the spectrum which is for dedicated to satellite, and the new, let's say, the new trend is to also utilize the spectrum that belongs to mobile operators, so the IMT spectrum. Yep. Or the terrestrial spectrum. Already that give you the hint that traditional spectrum from satellite has already certain rule, it's allocated, it's been more regulated because it's been there for quite some time. While the new trend is new, therefore we are missing there's still a lot of question marks. There are areas where I think Skylo mentioned it. For example, the FCC has introduced a new system to look at or cater for that, but it's not spread on the rest of the world. It's still quite a nascent way. And of course, it's also changed the business model. As you mentioned, it's not just the regulation, but it's the business model aspect. If you go to, in one case, you want to be much quicker in the market. You want to use the device that you have now, but you still have proprietary aspects. On the other case, you want to follow the standard, therefore you need to wait for the new devices. But then you have everything set, is much more, let's say, clear, yep. But it takes a little bit longer. And that's why they go to the standard base. But from the regulatory perspective, I think we still have to look at interference. And it is interference not just from terrestrial but satellite, but then if you also have different layer, you do the MEO, the LEO, and the GEO. Also, those you need to be careful how to not interfere to each other. So those are all areas that we need to look at, and then there's a lot of other regulation for, the legal interception, for the rights, the landing rights. I mean, there's a long list of things that we still need to look at, and I think the world is starting to look at. So I think as I said, it's moving with the technology, but we don't have all the answer yet. So as I said, one is the spectrum, but it's not just about spectrum on the regulation. And spectrum, as I said, is evolving, and there are frameworks coming up. But yeah, so these are the two trends basically that we see on the spectrum.
And yeah, thank you for that. And E-Tech, do you think, like, when we talk about either standards or regulation on satellite services, do you think that we will see differences in different regions for that? Or do you think, like in China, for example, to the rest of Asia, to the rest of the world? Or do you think generally the regulatory questions will be common wherever we're talking about in the world?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very good question. I think MediaTek, we have been like advocate and driving like a standard solution for a couple of years. And we do believe that this is the right way to go, because that can create an economy of scale. Because before, the satellite industry is quite vertical. Every satellite operator have their own supplier, like they cover everything. But that also create a problem that it's quite fragmented market. So it's very difficult for them to interoperate. So that also make their device volume and ecosystem become very limited. So having a standard ecosystem, that certainly I can see most of the satellite operators do share the vision, because they do see the benefit that the mobile ecosystem like MediaTek, how we can contribute to them, help them to provide more competitive service, and that can also unify maybe the regulation framework. But of course, I think everyone understands that different market have a different maybe the speed. And for example, like in some countries, this some regulation already allow the satellite connecting to the legacy device without any modification. But in some other region, it is not allowed yet. I think from the policy, of course, we are not in a position to make any comment. But from technology-wise, I do share the view with Barbara. Is the interference. We do see there is a problem if the satellite try to use a legacy terrestrial spectrum. There is actually some unexpected interference problem, because the technical fundamental thing is that in the cellular, we usually put the uplink channel in the lower frequency. We put downlink channel at a higher frequency, because we believe that the base station have more transmit power. But usually in the satellite, not always, but sometimes it's opposite, because satellite is actually very power limited, because there is no power plug in the space. Everything comes from solar panel. So the satellite is very downlink transmit limited, and uplink is actually fine, because the terminal usually have a power plug. So they usually put the uplink at the downlink at the lower part. But when you try to have a satellite connecting to the legacy device, you actually need to follow the cellular configuration that force satellite to the opposite way. But the problem is that now, because you are connecting to the smartphone, and the smartphone is only directional. So every single power 23 dB, and you are transmitting to the cellular tower, that will also leak to the satellite. So that will actually kill the satellite uplink receiver. So of course, you can try to use some technology like a beamforming, try to do the interference mitigation, but we do see there is some interference problem there. So we are the first company in 3GPP. We have been promoting we have to study this interference coordination between the NTN and the TN network. It has not been accepted yet, but we have been proposing a couple of years, where we do see the interest is now getting higher and higher increase. Yeah, we'll keep driving, and we do see now the ITUR is also discussing how to harmonize the spectrum and how to manage the interference. And yeah, we will keep contributing our technology to 3GPP and find out a way to make it work. And hopefully that can help the regulator feel more comfortable when they try to grant the license for such application.
We got about 5 minutes left, and I want to ask Daniel a product kind of strategy question, and then I've got a lightning round question for everybody, super fast. Daniel, so putting aside technology and just talking about sort of sales and marketing in terms of how, I know you specialize in the IoT space, but if you're an end customer, I mean, how high is the awareness level for NTN connectivity now, and what needs to be done to sort of improve the value proposition or the sales proposition for this, whether you're a telco operator or an ecosystem partner and selling that in?
Yeah, this is a big question, but I'll try to be directive as possible. Okay, so if you look at the whole ecosystem, the chipset, the end device, the carriers, the connectivity, the satellite companies, I think the key for us right now is, I think for the OEM or the ODM is at the exploring stage. They want to find out, okay, what sort of use cases can embed the NTN IoT into the TN. Okay, so this is very early stages. But at the same time, they have to, for the satellite, for the legacy satellite companies, I think it's a new thing for them is they might have to focus only on the connectivity itself now, when the standard is getting more and more into the release stages, right? So they have to accept chipset company like us. We are helping to do the hardwares. Then you just have to follow the connectivity. But this, for the IoT industry or for a newer market, I think is really to fulfill the gap where the TN cannot achieve previously. But eventually, the application itself, it will be dual, will be TN and NTN to be combined to satisfy a use case where you really can guarantee, let's just say 24/7, 365 days, you are connected to the network. The data is transferred to your cloud. The AI can consume the data. But I think this will be the future, which for us, as a semiconductor company, for Nordic, our focus will be dual, TN and NTN, on a single module, on a single firmware. So this will be our sort of product definition when we go into 2026, 2027. Yeah.
So lightning round question to each of you. And by lightning round, I mean, we're asking for responses in 30 seconds or less. What I want to know is, next 12 months, single biggest opportunity and single biggest risk to satellite. So just single biggest opportunity and single biggest risk. How should we think about that? Barbara?
For the GSMS perspective, I would say the roaming. Let's get the roaming in place.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm a technical guy, so I cannot comment on the marketing part. But from the technical part, I do see of course, the 6G is coming. So we have done a lot of experiment on the NR-NTN, IoT NTN, and we do see the NR was not designed for satellite from day one. So we do see there's still room to improve. So we do hope the 6G NTN eventually we can provide the most ultimate efficient like a radio technology to cover both satellite and the terrestrial.
Daniel?
Yeah, I would say the risk is I hope the regulation in each region, each countries, like what Barbara said, will be moving along with the technologies. Doesn't want to be a bottleneck with that. And secondly, probably for Nordic itself, we will have a sort of a new product, new chipset, which is the 92 series, be launching early next year. So we'll be really focused on NTN and the terrestrial and non-terrestrial. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Lots to be thinking about. Lots more to discuss. I dare say we'll be back here again next year talking about this as we were last year and at the other summits that we are hosting around the world on this topic. But thank you all so much for sharing your insights, being up here. I think combined with our first panel looking at the convergence story and then here getting into the innovation pipeline, devices, chipsets, regulation, it's hopefully given all of you in the audience a good perspective on things. And thank you guys as well for being here the whole time. I know a number of people are still standing. I mean, I hope that was good exercise. We appreciate it. The slides will be available on our website. I again remind you, please get your badge scanned by the scanners. That means it will give you the content automatically. and we want you to do that. So thank you again for coming. Thanks to all our speakers, and have a great rest of Shanghai.